afternoon and welcome. I'm Courtney Bailey with Leadership Austin.
And I'm Trenzio Turner with Austin PBS. Thank you for joining us for today's engaged topic on a call to action against anti-Semitism in Greater Austin.
As many of you know, in the past few months, there have been acts of hate, bigotry, and violence committed against the Jewish community in our area. For example, Anderson High School was vandalized with swastikas, homophobic language, and anti-Black racist slurs. Jewish residents in Hayes County were sent hate letters, and anti-Semitic stickers and flyers were left in Ramsey Park in Central Austin.
And the neo-Nazi group, traveling to spread their message of hate against Jewish communities, hung an anti-Semitic banner across an overpass on North Mopac in Austin. They posted hate flyers on the front lawns of San Antonio's Churchill Estates and Deerfield neighborhoods, and they held demonstrations across from the San Antonio Jewish Community Center.
So we've invited a diverse panel of leaders to help unpack these issues and to share some action steps. So joining us is Rabbi Neil Blumoff. Rabbi Neil is the senior rabbi at Congregation of Agudas Achim in Austin.
Next, we have Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett. Dr. Colette is the president and CEO of Houston-Tillotson University.
And rounding out the panel is the Reverend Dr. Daniel Jocelyn Simatowski. Reverend Dan is the Dean of Community Life at Seminary of the Southwest. Welcome, and thank you for being a part of today's panel.
Absolutely. And as a reminder, we would like to hear from everyone watching. So please share your comments and questions.
Now, before we dive into this important conversation, we would like to invite Rabbi Neil to ground us with a musical offering. Rabbi?
Thank you very much. It's an honor for us to be here and to share together. I invite you to take a deep breath and to perhaps close your eyes and set an intention for each of us as we experience this hour. Ya la 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 ya la la ya la ya la ya ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya mama ya la 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 ya la la ya la la ya la 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 oh ya la 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 ya la la
Thank you, Rabbi Neil, for that loving offering.
Absolutely, it was beautiful. Now, we considered putting together an all-Jewish panel, but we wanted to show that issues of hate should be addressed as a community-wide problem, and that includes a diversity of perspectives. Can each of you tell us why it's important for you to be a part of today's conversation? Let's kick things off with Dr. Colette, please.
First of all, I want to thank Rabbi Neil for that centering. We often get so caught up in the buzz of things. This is such an important conversation. I truly personally appreciated that moment. So thank you for that. I work with young people all the time. It's my profession and my why, and I'm very encouraged by what I see, their fearlessness and how they approach life, the complexity of life. And it's my role to use my own sphere of influence to remove barriers to their success. And a barrier to their success is moving into a society that has racist systems, hate, etc. So I feel it a personal calling and a personal responsibility to stay in these conversations, to advocate for us to move to a society that's a true beloved community, as Dr. King called it.
Thank you, Dr. Colette. Reverend Dan.
Thank you, and I really appreciate Neil's offering. He's a friend and a co-teacher with me. At Seminary Southwest, I am also the professor of church history. I form clergy, people aspiring to be pastors in Christian churches. And I teach on the history of Jewish-Christian relations. Anti-Semitism is both religious and racial in nature. And the religious roots of that come out of Christian hostility towards Jews and Judaism that resulted in violence, legal discrimination for centuries, and that legacy is still with us. And so I think it's a moral duty for myself as a Christian, as a Christian leader, to speak up against anti-Semitism and to be an ally with Jews and to teach and encourage other Christians.
No worries. Keep it moving. Don't want to cut you off, Reverend Dan.
No, that's all I had to say there.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. Rabbi Neil, you want to close us out? I see you smiling there.
Thank you so much. And Trenzio and Courtney, thank you so much for your gracious hospitality and for this wonderful opportunity to share with my dear friends and colleagues, Dr. Colette and Dr. Dan as well. We are very much encouraged to be siloed in our lives, unfortunately. And I think loneliness is a very important scourge and plague within our society. So I think it is an important act of resistance for us to realize that we're all in this together, and that when we speak about anti-Semitism, we're really speaking about hatred, we're really speaking about fear and anxiety from others, and we need each other. We are networked together, and for us to be able to share together our experiences, make them common experiences, gives us strength, gives us valor and appreciation for each other, for us to be able to encounter this very difficult work day after day, year after year.
Thank you, Rabbi Neil. Thank you all for opening us up with that.
So, Rabbi Neil, I have a follow-up question for you. The Jewish identity is often debated. You know, is it a religion? Is it ethnicity, nationality, culture, peoplehood, DNA? How much of that matters? You know? So with that being said, how do you define your Jewish identity? And what do you believe is the defining feature of Jewish identity in life today?
Thank you, Courtney. You've opened up a really important and engaging aspect of who we are and what we are and how we are in the world, not only for the Jewish community, but I think for many of us. For me, Judaism at its heart gives us the opportunity to question and to be creative, as well as be countercultural in all the aspects that we are, in order to engage the world around us. It allows us to think about and take a pause before saying that we're going to go ahead with just how things have been, and really dream and vision how things can be. We also realize that we're in a position where it's necessitated that we reach out and create friendships with positive examples, leadership, curiosity, and listening. So while we can debate the things that sort of make us Jewish, I think Judaism provides for all of us a sense of wisdom and a sense of freshness that allow us to engage our world and respond, and to anticipate some of the biggest issues that are on our lives and in the lives of the generations that will follow us.
Thank you, Rabbi Neil.
Reverend Dan, I have a question for you, and it actually kind of picks up on your opening statement there. It's a two-part question. According to the Pew Research Center, 77% of religious adults in Texas identify as Christian. First part of the question is, what are your opinions on the current state of Jewish-Christian relationships? And part two, what concrete steps can Christian leaders and followers take to combat anti-Semitism?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Although there's been a long history of Christian hostility towards Jews, there's been a real marked improvement since the end of World War II. And in the United States, real growing warmth of relationships between Jews and Christians. In my work, whenever I encounter Christians when I'm talking about this issue, they always intend to have good relationships with the Jewish people, by and large, and want to understand how to do that better. And so one of the concrete steps is, this is moving to your second part of your question, is for Christians to take on the responsibility of learning how their tradition in ways has been harmful towards Jews and Judaism, and for Christian leaders to help them unlearn some of those things. Like, for example, the ways in which Jews can be represented negatively in the New Testament by language like the Pharisees, or we can have unwitting hymns or preaching that puts Judaism in a negative light so Christianity can look better. And so ways to just unlearn that binary way of thinking so that we can move into a more of a collaborative space is really essential right now.
Okay. Thank you for that. Unlearning.
Now, I want to expand the conversation a bit further when it comes to intersectionalities. So Dr. Collette, as the president of a historically Black university, you know all too well the importance of incorporating racial healing and trauma into student and faculty life. How can we as a society begin to expand our education and understanding around the intersectionality of different forms of oppression, past and present?
So I want to honor some history between historically Black colleges and the Jewish community. When the Jews first came to our nation, the intellects such as Albert Einstein were unable to teach in the more prestigious, and I put quotes around that, institutions, and they could only find work as scholars at historically Black colleges. So we've had an intersection of our causes, if you will, for a very, very, very long time. So I want to honor that space, and I think it's a continued commitment. I know it's a continued commitment. So when we talk about, what's necessary, I always go back to the individual, because it's really about individual and how we operate. So we need to understand that we're all biased. We all, as humans, have natural biases, and we have to do that hard work, which I refer to as hard work, because it's self-reflection, and how we can start ridding ourselves of flawed, racist, and anti-Semitic ideas to make the world a better place. It really takes it upon all of us. And I've experienced and been in spaces where we have this oppression Olympics, where my oppression is worse than your oppression as a Black person, as opposed to a Hispanic person or a Jewish individual person. And there's no value in that, because there is no winning. And until we're all faced with what we have to do as our self-work and our own self-spheres of influence, we're not going to continue to make progress, because if one sector is oppressed, we are all oppressed. And even the title of the show is ATX Community. And we can't choose when we want to be a community, when it feels good. We have to choose when we want to be a community, when we're fighting against something that is anti-progressive and anti-love. And that's anti-hate, anti-racism, fighting against anti-Semitism, etc.
And can I roll in there for a second? Is that all right?
Yes.
Thank you. So Dr. Collette, that's absolutely, I think that's so essential for us to learn. And you and Dr. Dan have been my teachers for a long, long time about how to engage the community. And we have such opportunities in front of us as well. One of the most rewarding ways of applying what you're speaking about is with a dear friend of mine, Reverend Dr. Darrell Horton, us looking at the book of Exodus, specifically the narrative of the children of Israel enslaved in Egypt, and for us to look at it together, to speak honestly about it together, and to model a conversation about that both deepens the story itself and allows people to see things from ways that they may not have seen them before. So it's not only fighting, it's a way of being proactive in creating that precious, beloved community about which we all yearn.
Thank you for that. And I want to repeat what Dr. Collette said earlier. If one sector is oppressed, we're all oppressed. So I want us to think about that. I also want to remind the audience that you can engage with us by typing your comments and questions, and we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. And this next set of questions will be open to the group, so anyone can answer. So feel free to jump in and sort of jump on each other's comments back and forth to sort of share. The Texas legislature passed HB 3979 and SB 3 over the summer. Both laws focus on how teachers talk about racism, history, and current events in their classrooms. How do you see this impacting what children are taught in schools, and what are the implications for combating racism, eh, for combating the racism and bigotry that we're talking about today?
As a historian, I'd just like to jump in here.
Absolutely.
After the Holocaust, the Federal Republic of Germany and later unified Germany chose to really educate their children about what the Holocaust was and to talk about the ways in which ordinary people, citizens, were implicated in the horrors of it. And so these bills that were passed are really distressing to me because there is a real horror about aspects of American history, especially around race, especially around anti-Blackness, but also against Indigenous and Latinx communities. And so for us to look away from it and to think that by looking at that which is painful and hurtful and evil is somehow going to harm our children, I think it's the exact opposite. Teaching the fullness of our history makes our children better moral agents. And I think we can learn well from how other countries have chosen to engage with this sort of legacy.
So I just want to add on to what Reverend Dan said. In addition to it being in the curriculum there in Germany, almost every student visits a Holocaust memorial museum or a concentration camp. It's so that you will not repeat that history. It's the heart work. They're working on children's hearts, which is a major part of the experience. And the whole conversation around critical race theory, people really don't understand critical race theory, and it's used as fear mongering to divide us. So how can you teach the Trail of Tears or about the Civil War or about the Civil Rights Movement if we're not telling a true history that's not objectified, or it's not split, or we don't tell the positive ending, or we don't tell the truth. So learning real history, because that's how you stop to repeat history that you don't want to repeat, or repeat history that you do want to repeat. So we should really be conscious of that fear mongering that's in the atmosphere to make people think, oh, we don't want to do that because that's anti-whiteness, or that is racist to teach it in that way. And when you really understand, it's to have a good understanding of history, which is good for all people, even in our families. When we find out about our family history, even our health history, it helps us to be a better person to understand that history. So it's nothing to fear, and we have to have courage to do that, because fear is everywhere, but the courage is when you move into the fear to make the world a better place.
I think those comments by my dear friends have been so profound, and this idea about fear is so central, I think, to how many of us are so motivated, and one compensates for one's fear by numbing oneself. And to walk through our precious wild lives benumbed does not allow us a chance to have those rich friendships and to plan a future of prosperity for all in our community. And that opportunity that we have to, again, ask those difficult questions and take that, DNA test of ourselves, of our spirit, and of our culture to allow us more information and to allow us complete information is important. And those of us who have raised families, we recognize how we balance how we speak to our children. And it's really an important aspect of when and how to deliver honest information so our kids feel loved and held and seen. And there's no difference between that and all of us and the obligations we have for each other in this world.
Thank you all for that. So I heard embracing the history and not being afraid to push through whatever fears may be there, so that we don't repeat our past and so that we learn new things and push forward. Thank you all for sharing that.
So I want to turn this next question to some of the hate groups that have been popping up in our community. So with the rise of anti-Semitism and other hateful acts in our community and around the country, how do we balance informing people about what's going on while not giving hate groups the attention they're desperately seeking? Rabbi Neil, I'm going to kick it to you first.
Thanks, Courtney. I appreciate that. And the ability that we have to know what's going on in each other's lives is really important. It's wouldn't want to just have a daily announcement of some of the difficulties that we have, but rather I would rather call on my friends and say, how are you? What's going on? Here's what's going on for me. And to have those friendships that are interlocking. As I've said in this time period, and I'd like to say it here too, the real sense of what friendship is and the real sense of what love is not just to say someone loves someone, but is to know the pain of the other person, is to know what drives the other person. And the more we know each other, the more we can consider ourselves in a friendship circle or in a community together. So we do have exceptional groups like the Anti-Defamation League, like the ADL, which does monitor these things and monitor these acts. However, I think for us to check in on each other, to offer solace, leadership, and a shoulder for each other is really important to receive and give the love that we seek, because we're never going to get in front of all of the things just because of the way that the world is. However, if we can demonstrate a sense of allyship and solidarity, I think that we have a way of neutralizing that which threatens to undo us.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to this also as a parent of youth, teenagers. I'm aware that there's been other efforts in Central Austin. Stickers have been posted around various high schools and parks that clearly appear to be efforts at recruiting teenagers, young adults. So these events are first actions against the Jewish community, but also I think have an element of trying to find people who want to make common cause with these perpetrators. And so we have to recognize that we have a culture of despair and of hopelessness in our country right now. And when that kind of despair and hopelessness occurs, negativity can seep in and people can be drawn to negative elements. And so I think there's a lot of work that our schools, our city needs to do to reach out, that I think faith communities have a significant role to really reach out to populations that are vulnerable to being targeted, especially teenagers and young adults, that really serious interventions need to be made, and that the allyship that Dr. Collette and Rabbi Neal are talking about springs into action to help lift up youth who are at risk of slipping into this culture of despair.
The only thing I can add to that is that it requires action. Courtney, you're so right. It's such a delicate balance of how much attention you give to something to educate people and the attention you give to it to elevate its message. I mean, that's such a delicate balance. So it has to be, we have to have action, and that action has to be rooted in fighting against it. So for every act of hate, there's an act of love. So that it's like water rolling over the jagged rock. Eventually, the stronger the water does change the jagged rock. And it's really action that all of us have to take when we see hate or we see anti-Semitism. You do something that's anti to that, or you engage in conversations about why you feel that that's offensive or that that's leading into something that's anti-Semitic or anti-rape or hateful or anti-Black, because you have to have action to fight against it. But it is such a delicate balance that we are struggling as a society to find how we emphasize something that's important without giving, and not emphasize something that's hateful without giving it too much attention. Like people, I didn't even know there was a Proud Boys, and then did we open a can of worms because we start talking about it, or are we educating someone about one group or the other, however you feel?
Thank you all for that.
Yes, and absolutely. Dr. Collette, I think your comments about action are right in line with this next question that we have, and again, it's open to the group. Thanks to help from groups like thanks to groups like Austin Anti-Defamation League, the City of Austin, and Travis County have taken steps to address anti-Semitism in our region. A couple examples are Austin City Council recently passed a resolution condemning anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred and violence against Jewish community members. And both Travis County and the city of Austin have formed a collaborative hate crime task force whose vision is to create a community free of hate. My question is, how can our government ensure that these recent steps are sustainable, one, and then two, what does accountability look like for our government? And Rabbi Neil, you want to kick us off with that one?
Thank you, Trenzio. I appreciate that.
You
You know, our government is really just the civic participation of all of us and each of us. And I do want to give credit to City Rep Allison Alter for putting forward that resolution that was unanimously passed by the City Council of Austin. So I think that is important. And in addition, we all saw the groundswell of response that was spearheaded by Interfaith Action of Central Texas. That's IACT, headed up by the incredible Simone Thelma Flowers, who jumped on this and recognized that this is not the community we want to live in, and encouraged others to get involved. So how do we keep our government accountable? By getting involved, by asserting our voice, by showing that we are the government and we can see how fragile everything is. And I think Reverend Dan's point about a culture or a difficulty and despair that we're living in is true. However, I think one of the important books that has motivated me is at least the title. I don't know if I got through the whole book, but it's by Samuel Beckett. And it's a title called I Can't Go On, I'll Go On. And that's how I feel a lot of the time. And we don't have any other choice. When we are the democracy, when we are the voices of this republic, then we are to keep each other carried. And like you would see in any of those inspirational videos when somebody can't make it to the finish line and you just put them around you put your arm around them and bring them with you. There's a time and a place for each of us, and we're all healers and we're all in need of healing. So we need to continue to put the pressure on our elected officials and make sure that that we have transparency in all that we do, and to model these actions that we ourselves would want to have for the community that we want to take. So I say get more involved, and I'm just so grateful to Leadership Austin and to PBS and to so many others who model these kinds of civic discourses and ways of getting involved that is so crucial for the spiritual health of the community that we're in.
I can just add to that. First of all, I always learn something from Rabbi Neil. He just added to my reading list because I'm always looking to grow and I consider myself a social justice warrior, really. And you get tired sometimes. And I can't go on. I will go on. I'm adding that to my reading list. And I think often about people in the civil rights movement and other eras, other movements, and how if they got tired and did not want to do anything more, I wouldn't be on this panel right now. I would not be the president of a university in Austin, Texas, a city like Austin, Texas, and on this panel. So I have a responsibility to continue in that movement, whatever it looks like. And racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice. It, in fact, is embedded in our system. So we often look to the government to fix that, but the government is made up of people, and the accountability is in all of us. It's embedded in our legal system, our housing system, our health system, our educational system. So we have to make individual choices that do not continue to fuel racism. So the government can pass a proclamation, and then people have to carry that out in addition to continuing to hold the government accountable. We often fall into this, they are going to fix it, and the they is us. And when you have that personal accountability in the decisions that you make in your work life, your personal life, that's when we start getting more shoulders on that moral arc to bend it towards justice, as opposed to when we sit back and think that the government, local government, state government, federal government is responsible. They are accountable, but people put people in office. People have to vote down the ballot. People have to go to school board meetings. People have to go to neighborhood association meetings, because it's that individual action that starts to dismantle, because it's not really about racist people as much as it's about racist systems that are in place that we have to continue to fight to dismantle those systems.
Dr. Collette, I appreciate you honing in on the systems. So we have a question from our audience. What advice does the panel have about pushing through on this topic on top of the stress of the pandemic? Who would like to take that?
Okay. The pandemic, I don't know if this is a response to that question directly, but the pandemic, whether you look at this as a fortune or a silver lining around the cloud or not, is what has honed in on what a deep problem we have. Because the problem was already there, where those who are not who do not have as much education or are not in jobs where they can work at home, the inequities in our health systems, the disparities of healthcare, the pandemic has shone a light on that. Now, what do we do? That is the question. Do we, as the pandemic, as we move to the end of this, prayerfully, how do we then act as a society to lift those who were most affected by the pandemic? And so the pandemic has shown a light on it, on the inequities. Even we were all sat still during what happened to Mr. Floyd, because we were all quiet. So it was an intervention that is in our face. Now, what do we do? So the pandemic has actually shown us what a deep problem we have as a society.
I really agree with that. I think lifting up the pandemic alongside other crises, we have the crisis of racism. So the George Floyd protests coming out of recognizing the crisis of the pandemic. And then we have the crisis of our institutions, our society that the January 6th insurrection shows. And these are all linked. And so I think showing up for each other, acknowledging our exhaustion, our vulnerability, our need for each other in the midst of all of these compounding crises, and to show up for each other. And when one person has to step back, another person steps up. And to acknowledge that network of mutuality that Dr. King speaks of, that helps us build beloved community.
In addition to that, I think that this time should not go without passing with recognizing the incredible numbers of deaths that we've had in our communities and in our country that we have not yet even begun to talk about because of the pandemic. And I think that is going to be an important aspect of how we ultimately, collectively, God willing, come out of the pandemic, but to acknowledge the loss around us. At the same time, as just building on what Dr. Collette was so wisely suggesting, is it's given us an opportunity to prioritize our lives. Many of us are speaking about folks who are able to have the privilege to maybe quit their job or start something new. It's called the Great Resignation. But for many of us, can assess what we're actually doing here and why we're doing it and for whom. To recognize that our lives are so precious, our days are so few, and that we're just passing through gives us hopefully added strength to be able to take ourselves up shoulder to shoulder to do this mutuality and to help each other out without thinking that we are somehow falling behind. So it gives us hopefully a spiritual new start of recognizing what is at stake, what the issues might be and how deep they go, and how much opportunity we have to lend our strength every day.
Thank you for that. So recognizing what is at stake and the opportunity that we have to make a difference. I appreciate that. Cinzio?
Yes, I'm just looking at the chat, and there's a lot of nodding, virtual nodding taking place over here. Justin says, absolutely agree. Dr. Pierce Burnett, thinking about how to respond to people who bring up, in quotes, with fear, critical race theory without context and understanding of what it is. It's a comment picking up on what you mentioned earlier. There seems to be a lot of interest in the education aspect of it, in particular going back to what we talked about with the bills and sort of what the future looks like there. Any more thoughts on sort of that aspect of educating at the younger levels, whether it be elementary school, middle school, high school, and then even pushing on up into the college ranks?
You're kicking it to me. I'm going to be like Rabbi Neil. Thank you, Trenzio, for kicking that to me. I really appreciate that. You know, young people are our future. I mean, they are, and they're very open. You think generationally. My students, I learn more from them than they learn from me. I cannot say that enough. They're very open and inquisitive and wanting to learn, and they're strong enough to make decisions. We want to teach them to be good critical thinkers with the information that they receive in a very healthy way. That's what our teachers do so well. So we should allow allow that learning to happen and not be fearful of our own history. I mean, I would be repeating myself. I feel so strongly about that even in college, letting young people, exposing them to all aspects of an argument, to have a good, healthy conversation about it. And then as individuals with their own ethics, their own morals, their own core values, they choose a route they want to take in life. But it's our responsibility to give them all of the information. It's not for us to tell them what to think. It's for us to tell them what to think about. That's what effective learning really is. Learning and teaching is to tell young people what to think about, and how critical their opinion is, and how critical their voice. We want them to be good citizens, good engaged citizens, and that's a journey, a very, very, very important journey.
I would just add that this category of critical race theory was an invented controversy to divide us in a moment when this country was coming together to really talk seriously to the question of race, where white folks in particular were listening to people of color about their experience and beginning to learn, where we have runaway unexpected bestsellers during the pandemic because people are digging in. And so to step back from the efforts to divide and reframe it as curiosity and empathy, that our lives are better when we're curious about each other, to build on what Dr. Collette was saying, to be curious about each other's experiences, to want to become better citizens by learning about each other's histories, and to not be afraid of it, and to use that curiosity to bring us into places of deep empathy with each other. And so I would really encourage a reframe of critical race theory once brought up to move people towards curiosity and empathy, and to not shut off the conversation by moving into our own reactivity around those efforts to divide.
And I know there's a lot to cover. However, I do think it's worth noting, Dan, the courage of Seminary of the Southwest to teach the course that you offer, that I am privileged to help with, which is Undoing Anti-Judaism in the Church. And it is a semester course that unflinchingly and with love looks at the patterns of how a church and church writings formed an aspect of looking at the world, and with the problematic ways, and in the ways perhaps that the voices of the education, the voices of the new generation can help be creative about it. Dan, I'd love for you to think about that, because it's been some of the most important work that I've done in Austin with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you, Neil.
I want to lift what Rabbi Neil said earlier about our humanity, and for example, the more I get to know Rabbi Neil, I'm Christian, he's Jewish, I'm Black, he's white, I'm a male, I'm a female, he's a male. We're very different, but we're very much alike. So we're more alike than we are different. And if I were to see him on the street, I would have my own stereotypes, bias, whatever those are. Then I would form those, and it can either lean into us building a good relationship and getting to know each other or not. That's a personal choice we all make. When we see someone who is different than us, a different religion, a different creed, race, or color, and then we build these biases and we don't continue to open ourselves up to find out at a human level, we're all afraid of something, we all love something, we've all been hurt, we all have a story. And when we learn each other's stories, then we get to know that we are more alike than we are different. And that's how we can move relationships forward. And it's really about relationships and accountability.
Thank you for that. I'm going to read a couple of comments that we have, and then I have another question just so folks can feel heard in the panel. So Yolanda McCarty says, I totally agree. CRT was intentionally to divide us. So true. And we have another comment from Deborah watching. She says, learning all sides of issues is why these series by Leadership Austin are so important. Thank you, Dr. Collette and the rest of the panel for reminding us. So I have another question that was texted to me. The question is, why do you think this is happening now in Central Texas? And I see, Dr. Collette, your eyes are moving. So do you want to take that?
I was going to say, is the anti-Semitism?
Yeah.
Is that okay? People have been, the ugliness, we've created this culture and this environment where it's okay to be hateful. And that makes me sad and afraid that it's okay to say things and to do things that are, I think, brutal. And that's where action comes in, like how we respond to this, like for all faiths, all people, all walks of life to have a reaction to it. It's just not happening to the Jewish community. It's happening to all of us. And we all have to respond and be just as hurt and crushed by that. And this environment, this culture of it's okay to be hateful, is what's I think, I believe, in my opinion, is a part of why we see this upsurge of it, because of divisiveness. And however, whatever you think that's rooted in, it doesn't really matter what it's rooted in. It matters, I shouldn't say that. It matters what it's rooted in, but it really matters how we respond to that. That's what really matters.
And I would say too, and I thank you so much, Dr. Collette, that these are not isolated events. This is not just happening in Central Texas. This is all over the place. Mm-hmm. And I would agree with Dr. Collette. It's acts of hate. You know, we could subreddit it and call it anti-Semitism or racist, but it's all hate. And the fact that we know about it and recognize that we are being poked in this community, I think it's a lot of things. I think it has a lot to do with we're forgetting quite quickly because of social media and other things of actually how to engage each other well, and the opportunities that we have to the challenges that we have of not realizing how to speak to each other, how to engage each other, and how to respect each other, I think is very important. And as Dr. Collette mentioned, this is an opportunity for us. It's a way of how are we going to respond when the tough get going. What are we going to go do? Are we going to just say, well, nothing we can do about it? Or are we going to respond with radical acts of love and uplift and joy and empathy and caring and love, and actually demonstrate the friendships that are based in respect and knowledge and care of the other, as opposed to just checking boxes. And I think that is the work that we're doing. And that's very, very important. And that demands everybody's attention. And unfortunately, it may be that there's these acts that wash through this particular community. But this is the holy work that we can be doing every day in order for us all to enjoy a community that we're proud of, and a community that truly can be a blessing as we continue to deepen our engagement with all that needs fixing.
Yeah, I just want to affirm both of those things. I think also just the openness of Austin creates a target for others. All the things that Austin embodies and values creates, some hostility. Folks came from outside to cause trouble here. It's worth remembering, as well as there were, some folks who lived here at Anderson High School. But we are now in a global city, and so we're getting a renewed sort of attention on us as well.
And I just want to make sure, Dan, that just because we can speak, it's not just that we are waiting for some provocateur coming. I think that there are conditions in our community and every community that once exacerbated unleash hate, and for us to be able to recognize that while that may have been the case, that we have issues right here in town and right here in Greater Austin for us to pay attention to and to minister to and to educate and to model against, which is very, very important. It may have been something that caught a little bit of brush fire, but it's something that is certainly part of this community as well as many, many others as well.
Thank you. And I want to read another question in the comments. And Reverend Dan, this is for you. I want to give you a chance to clarify. It's from Yolanda. It says, reframe a CRT to move people toward curiosity and empathy. And they have question marks there. It said, why do we have to reframe it? It is a framework that does just that, but there's going to be discomfort and people have to be okay with being uncomfortable for us to move forward. I want to give you a chance to sort of share that.
Yeah, I think critical race theory, as it actually exists, is very useful. And I agree that discomfort is part of developing and growing and moving into places of empathy. What I meant was the manufactured controversy over critical race theory that created hysteria and we could say a white backlash against teaching about race in schools is the thing that was made divisive, not critical race theory itself, but a whipped up paranoia and fear about that wasn't real. And that was a thing that was creating division. And so I think Yolanda and I perhaps are on the same page. I just wanted to clarify what I meant there about critical race theory.
Oh, thank you for that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I know some people may wonder, like, why are we focusing on critical race theory and talking about that in this conversation? All of these things are interconnected, and we just have to remember that, like, as mentioned earlier, they're not isolated. And so one impacts the other.
Right. Yeah. And many racists include Jewish identity in their racism. So anti-Semitism is a form of racism. And so I think that's the important piece. Often in the United States, we operate in a white-black race binary. And to expand that, not to get into an oppression Olympics, as Dr. Collette named before, but to note the reality that we live with and the various nuances and lenses we need to bring to the conversation, I think is important here.
And Dr. Collette, I saw you want to say something. I know you did.
I was just going to say, and the more we talk about it, the more we understand it and talk about it, and understand, everyone's experience. Oppression is oppression. Hate is hate. There aren't levels of it. What am I, a 10 and you're a 3? So I get more attention because I'm a 10 and you're a 3. Let's just fight for about hate against just the gravity of having a hateful community, or gravity of having a community that has racist systems in it, that impacts people's education, people's health care, where they can live, their quality of life. That is the challenge, and that's where the focus needs to be. So of course, I'm a Black woman, so I'm most concerned. I'm unapologetically a Black female, so I'm most concerned about what's happening with my race. But in my fight against that, when I read about what's happening to the Jewish community, I'm hurt by that because it's hateful. And in my fight for my equity for my own people, then I'm also working to lift everyone in that right, irrespective of whatever their race is. I'm really worried about oppression Olympics in our community. I think it's anti the movement as opposed to leaning into the movement. We all need to be standing together because we're stronger together. There's an African proverb, I say it all the time: you want to go fast, go alone; you want to go far, go together. And we need to be in this together.
And I would agree, and I know more to do. I just wanted to say what I think we're all thinking, which is, all of it is a slippery slope also. And we have seen in our history that how quickly people, cultures can be dehumanized.
Right.
And this is a collective fight against that. And this is a fight for friendship. This is a fight for the world we want to see. And Dr. Collette, I want to go with you as far as we can go, because I don't want to go alone. I don't walk that fast. So I think it's really important for us to recognize that, like it or not, all of us, we're in this work, and I am going to dedicate my life, because I am a student of history, to see that we do not walk around either numb or dehumanizing others for us to feel better. And that, to me, is a difficult side of relativizing our history.
I'm going to use that fight for friendship. That is very prophetic, a fight for friendship.
I love that too. Before Trinzio takes us to our final call to action, I would like to read a comment from Justin Brady Joyner that shares similar sentiments about hate. Justin says, "I'm so sad about how open, bold hatred has been encouraged and how people are emboldened to share their hatred loudly. It's also helping us all to see that the hatred was there before we saw it so prevalently too." Trinzio?
Yep. Thank you, Courtney. All right. I can't believe we're getting towards the end. It's time for us to get into our call to action. And so I'm going to read to you our final call to action, and then we definitely want each of you to share with us your thoughts. And it is, what are concrete examples that the viewers can do as individuals and collectively as a community to combat anti-Semitism? And let's start off with Reverend Dan on this one.
I think it's important to not be a bystander, to realize that the harm that happens to others outside of your own group is a harm that happens to you as well. As Dr. King says, we are caught up in this web of mutuality. And I think it's important for people who are not Jewish to educate themselves on the problem of anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism. There are great resources out there. I think to not be a bystander includes knowing how to speak out and who to contact. I'd really encourage people to be aware of the activity of the Anti-Defamation League and know how to report incidents to the Anti-Defamation League, and to become friends with the Jewish community around us, to get to know Shalom Austin, the Jewish Community Center here, and to really lean into creating and fighting for those friendships that Rabbi Neil talked about.
All right. Thank you, Reverend Dan. Dr. Colette?
So I love that. Don't be a bystander. I have to repeat that you have to do your own heart work. It's self-work, self-reflection that will extrapolate itself into bigger things happening to move us towards that beloved community and that fight for friendship, and that in your spheres of influence and your walks in life, that you're conscious of the fact, because you understand others' stories, others' experiences, that you're conscious of the fact that you do not make choices that fuel racism in racist systems, that you are in fact fighting for that fighting for friendship, and that you're not making choices in your life that fuel racism, as opposed to making choices in your life that fuel moving equity into all of our systems.
Thank you, Dr. Colette. Rabbi Neil, bring us home.
Trinzio, thank you so much for calling on me. I appreciate it. Here's my thought. Let's just hang out. Let's all just hang out. Let's figure it out. Let's enjoy things together. Let's push our edge a little bit. We all need to get our steps in. So invite somebody to come with you around the lake. We got to eat. So maybe we can go sit outside somewhere and have a tea and talk about, I don't know about you, Dr. Colette, but I don't know what your pastry of choice is, but I'm sure I would be wowed by it. So, and let's have the conversations. And I would, if I get up on Sunday with nothing to do, maybe I'll go hang out with Dan and experience the service. Maybe I'll go check out who my neighbors are. I've lived in the same area for a long time, and we see them from time to time. But I remember growing up, that was a very important aspect of how we lived our lives. So I think each of us has a multitude of opportunities every day in order to learn incrementally. We don't have to become instant experts on things. This isn't the Matrix where we figure it out all automatically. This is our life's work. So if we really allow ourselves the understanding that we are here to create holy moments, then we have the opportunity in everything we do, not just when we're on doing this kind of work, but all the time we have the opportunity to engage, how we speak to someone in the grocery store. You know, it's that time of year. Are we going to say happy holidays? Are we going to say Merry Christmas? Are we just going to not say? Like, what are we going to do? What is that going to look like? How does that become a ministry of love, of engagement, of curiosity? And I think all the aspects that we have, and knowing that that we're networked, that we're not alone, gives us the opportunity and the confidence to be able to have those friendships that we seek. It's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to vanquish that which tries to oppress us. However, we're just going to keep getting up. And Dr. Collette, I'll tell you what, if you pick up the book, I'll finally finish it with you, because it's I can't go on, I'll go on. And the opportunities that we have to realize that we're in this together, and better together, is how we're going to engage, and how we're going to offer the actions that we so desperately seek for ourselves. Share, listen, and be well doing it, and have a sense of humor about it, y'all, for real.
Absolutely. I love those. Don't be a bystander. Do your work, and let's hang out.
Your heart
All
work.
great. Do your hard work. Yes, ma'am.
Heart.
Do your hard
Heart.
work. Hard work. Hard work. Thank y'all.
So thank you, Rabbi Neil Blumoff, Dr. Colette Pierce-Burnett, and the Reverend Dr. Daniel Jocelyn Simitowski for sharing your unique perspectives and calls to action. We hope that this conversation was helpful, and that all of you watching will continue to engage on this topic around meaningful ways to address anti-Semitism in our region, anti-Semitism and hate in our region.
Absolutely. And we hope that you can join us next month on January 12th, where our topic will be normalizing mental health and grief in our workplace. Thank you for tuning in today. All right. We hope you enjoyed it. Happy Hanukkah. And we hope that all of you have a peaceful rest of the holiday season. Looking forward to seeing you in the new year. Take care.